A regular traffic stop, the kind of thing that happens every day. But this time, the situation is about to take a turn no one expects. A black man, just like any other driver, is pulled over by a police officer. It seems like a simple encounter, but it's anything but that. What happens next? Well, you'll have to keep watching to find out. But here's what you should know. The officer's initial assumptions about this man will come back to haunt him in a way he could never imagine. In this video, we're diving deep into a real-life scenario where a racist officer's behavior is exposed in the most unexpected way. You'll learn about the shocking twist that turns this routine stop into a moment of reckoning, not just for the officer, but for the entire system. Stick with us, and you'll see how power, integrity, and justice collide in the most dramatic of ways. And here's the twist. This man isn't just another driver. He's someone who holds the fate of the officer's career in his hands. By the end of this video, you'll have a deeper understanding of accountability and just how easily the tables can turn when the right person is watching. Stay tuned. This is a story you won't want to miss. The officer walks up to the car, his hand already resting on his holstered gun. His eyes narrow as he looks through the window, sizing up the driver. Without saying a word, he asks for the man's license and registration, his voice colder than necessary. The man hands them over calmly, but the officer doesn't look satisfied. He eyes the man from head to toe, as if trying to judge him based on appearance alone. There's no reason for this level of suspicion, not yet anyway, but the officer's body language speaks volumes. He doesn't ask the usual polite questions like most officers would. No, instead, he demands to know where the man is coming from and where he's headed. His tone is sharp, filled with an edge that isn't typical of a routine stop. The man remains composed, answering each question politely, yet the officer doesn't seem to trust his responses. He starts looking around the car, not for any legitimate reason, but because he's decided that something's off. The man's calm demeanor only seems to make the officer more suspicious. The officer's discomfort isn't just in the air, it's in his eyes. He stands a little too close to the man, his posture aggressive, trying to assert control in a situation that doesn't require it. His questions become more pointed, the insinuations more clear. At one point, he asks if the man is carrying any weapons, his words wrapped in a judgment that no one should have to endure during a simple traffic stop. With each passing second, the situation grows more tense. The officer's actions aren't based on any evidence or reason. They're driven by bias. It's as if he's already decided that this man is guilty of something, even though there's no justification for it. The man, however, remains calm, trying to de-escalate the situation, but it's clear the officer isn't interested in understanding or fairness. Every move he makes is a reminder that, in this moment, the officer's assumptions are clouding his judgment. And yet, despite it all, the man continues to answer respectfully, his words measured and controlled, hoping to somehow bring the situation back to a place of normalcy. But with every passing moment, it's obvious the officer's attitude isn't about safety, It's about control. His biases are showing, and they're driving the entire interaction. The uncomfortable silence thickens as the officer, still standing over the man, seems to grow more convinced of his unjust suspicions. The man sits still in his seat, his hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. Despite the officer's harsh tone and invasive questions, he doesn't flinch. His face remains composed, betraying no sign of the frustration that most people would feel in this kind of situation. There's an undeniable air of dignity in his calmness, a quiet strength that contrasts sharply with the officer's growing impatience. Every time the officer's suspicion flares, the man simply responds with the same controlled, polite manner. As the officer leans in, trying to make the man uncomfortable with questions about his whereabouts and movements, the man's posture doesn't change. He doesn't become defensive or hostile, even though it's clear that the officer is looking for a reason to escalate things. The man's steady, calm voice doesn't waver, and he answers each question without hesitation, as though he is completely confident that there's no reason for this interaction to go any further. It's a remarkable display of restraint. When the officer begins to question his intentions more aggressively, the man doesn't raise his voice or show signs of anger. Instead, he remains polite, almost too polite, as though he knows that staying calm is the only way to avoid an even worse outcome. His hands never leave the wheel, and his eyes remain forward, never making unnecessary movements that could be seen as threatening. In the midst of the officer's bias, the man's poise stands out, almost like an unspoken challenge to the officer's assumptions. The tension builds, but the man stays grounded. Every moment that passes, he seems to grow more composed, as if he's seen this kind of treatment before, but refuses to allow it to disrupt his peace. His every action conveys that he will not be rattled, even by the officer's obvious attempts to provoke him. Even as the officer grows more frustrated, the man's response is always the same: calm, controlled, and above all, respectful. It's a stark contrast to the officer's growing irritation, highlighting how different reactions can be when one person maintains composure while the other is clouded by bias. The man's response is a silent refusal to meet the officer's unjust energy with anything less than grace. The officer stands a little taller now, his eyes narrowing as he eyes the man more critically. After a few moments of tense silence, the man speaks, his voice as calm as ever, but with a hint of something heavier beneath the words. "You know," he says, "I'm actually the head of internal affairs." The words hang in the air for a moment, almost as if the officer can't process them right away. He blinks, then shakes his head slightly, as if trying to clear the confusion. "Wait. What?" he stammers, clearly caught off guard. The man repeats himself, this time with even more certainty. "I said, I'm the head of internal affairs. I oversee investigations into police misconduct." The shift in the officer's demeanor is immediate. His body language, once confident and domineering, falters. His hand tightens around his radio, then quickly loosens, unsure of what to do next. His eyes widen, just enough for it to be noticeable, his jaw tightening as the weight of the revelation sinks in. It's as if the world around him slows down for a moment and he realizes the gravity of the situation. He stammers, I didn't know. But the man's gaze remains steady. There's no sympathy, no apology in his eyes, only a quiet acknowledgement of the power dynamics at play. The officer looks down, perhaps for the first time, questioning his actions as the truth dawns on him. The air between them is thick now, with the realization that the man in front of him is no ordinary driver. His calmness was not just a personal trait, it was a shield against the officer's unfair treatment, and now against the consequences that would follow. The officer fumbles for words, but none come out right. The man doesn't even need to say anything more. His position, his power, speaks volumes. The officer stands frozen, unsure of how to salvage the situation. He begins to regret every choice he made in the encounter, from his harsh tone to the way he treated the man. His mind races as he processes the implications of what he's just learned. The very person he's just treated unjustly holds the authority to hold him accountable for his actions. The officer's face flushes red as the realization sinks in. His posture shifts awkwardly, and he steps back just slightly, as if the weight of his own actions has become too much to bear. His eyes dart from the man to the ground, as if searching for something to steady himself, but there's nothing to grab onto. He clears his throat, an attempt to mask the wave of embarrassment washing over him, but it's too late. The damage is already done. Look, the officer starts, but his voice falters. He takes a step forward, then hesitates, unsure of whether he should try to apologize or simply get out of the situation. I didn't know, sir. I didn't know who you were. His words tumble out quickly, but there's no conviction behind them. It's as if he's desperately trying to salvage whatever's left of his authority, but it's clear that the man's position has stripped that away. The officer shifts from foot to foot, his nervous energy palpable. He forces a chuckle, but it sounds strained, even unnatural. I didn't mean to, treat you like that, he says, his voice cracking slightly. But his attempts at backtracking only make him seem more uncomfortable, more aware of how badly he's mishandled the situation. He's no longer the one in control. Now, he's the one caught in his own bias and poor judgment. The officer's hands twitch, uncertain of what to do with them. He touches his belt as if to steady himself, but the instinct to regain control only highlights how out of place he feels. His earlier stance, so firm and authoritative, has melted away. In its place is a man who realizes he's made a dangerous mistake. A mistake that could cost him much more than this traffic stop. As he tries to explain himself, the officer's words grow more jumbled. I didn't mean any harm, really. I thought you were someone else. His voice trails off as he looks up, meeting the man's unflinching gaze. The contrast couldn't be more stark. The officer's panic and regret versus the man's calm, composed presence. There's a long pause before the officer finally speaks again, his words laced with uncertainty. I'll just, I'll let you go. No ticket, no warning. You're free to go, sir. His attempt at regaining control of the situation feels forced and empty. It's too late. The officer knows he's been exposed. The man watches the officer closely, his expression unreadable. He knows the power he holds, and he knows what's at stake. As the head of internal affairs, his role isn't just about oversight, it's about accountability. This officer's behavior isn't just a minor slip-up, it's a clear violation of professional conduct, and it can't be ignored. The man could easily walk away, let the moment pass, but he understands that letting this go unchecked would only perpetuate a cycle of injustice. He calmly reaches for his phone, his movements deliberate. The officer watches nervously, wondering if this is the moment that his actions will come back to haunt him. The man doesn't say much, but it's clear he's already considering the next steps. He might file a report documenting every detail of the encounter, or perhaps he'll escalate the issue within the department itself. Either way, the officer can't escape the fact that someone with direct influence over his future is watching his every move. The man could easily take the matter to the department, triggering an investigation into the officer's conduct. Given his position, the officer's actions won't just be brushed aside. In fact, a full review could be initiated, leading to disciplinary action, suspension, or even termination. It's clear the officer's behavior has crossed a line, and the man in front of him has the power to ensure that the consequences are far-reaching. The officer knows this, and he can feel the tension building, knowing full well that his career might very well be in jeopardy. The man's silence speaks volumes. He doesn't need to make threats or speak harshly. His authority is enough to make the officer sweat. This is more than just a simple traffic stop. This is a reminder that actions have consequences, and those in positions of power must be held accountable. The man could also take a more personal approach, using his influence within the department to ensure the officer receives the proper training or oversight. He might even choose to educate the officer on his conduct, allowing for growth and change. But no matter the path he chooses, it's clear that justice will be served, and the officer's actions won't go unpunished. At the core of any functioning society, especially within law enforcement, fairness, integrity, and accountability must stand as pillars of justice. These principles are not just ideals, they are the foundation that ensures trust between the police and the communities they serve. When those in power uphold these values, they strengthen the very system they protect. But when these values are compromised, as we saw in this interaction, it undermines public trust and perpetuates a cycle of suspicion and fear. In this case, the officer's behavior was a clear reflection of the biases and assumptions that can cloud judgment. It wasn't until the power dynamic shifted, when he learned who the man truly was, that he realized the weight of his actions. That shift in power exposed his true character, a person whose authority was based not on fairness, but on the unfair treatment of others. It's a powerful reminder that in moments of vulnerability, our true selves often emerge. When power is misused, it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the entire system. Accountability is key in preventing these abuses, ensuring that those entrusted with authority are held to the highest standards. The consequences the officer now faces are not just about this one moment. They are about ensuring that law enforcement continues to strive for fairness and justice, rather than allowing personal biases to dictate actions. This situation highlights an important lesson for everyone, not just law enforcement. Power doesn't make someone untouchable. It's how we use our power that defines our integrity. When people in positions of authority act with fairness and accountability, they help build a system that everyone can trust. But when they fail to do so, they expose the cracks in the system, forcing it to confront the issues that often go unnoticed. In the end, it's not just about punishment. It's about creating a culture where integrity is the rule, not the exception. As we've seen today, moments like this reveal the deep-rooted systemic issues within policing, where bias, assumptions, and abuse of power can go unchecked. It raises an important question. How many more encounters like this happen every day, unnoticed, without accountability? And what can we do to ensure that these moments lead to real change, not just for the individual, but for the system as a whole? The story we've shared today is a reminder that true justice comes from holding those in power accountable, and that begins with us all demanding better. If we want to see change, we must keep questioning, keep pushing for fairness, and never settle for anything less than integrity in our institutions. If you found this video thought-provoking, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep these important conversations going and shed light on the issues that matter most. This is a fictional story created for illustrative purposes. While the scenario presented may reflect real-life issues, it is not based on any specific events or individuals. The purpose of this video is to raise awareness about important topics such as fairness, accountability, and bias within law enforcement.